A chilling wind swept across the Mediterranean, carrying with it an unseen terror. In the autumn of 1347, a fleet of Genoese trading ships, known as the Death Ships, sailed into the bustling harbor of Messina, Sicily. Their arrival was an omen, cloaked in the blood-red hues of a dying sun. These vessels, once symbols of prosperity, now bore a cargo of unimaginable horror. Below deck, amidst the usual goods, lay the lifeless forms of sailors, their bodies twisted, their skin marred by grotesque, blackened sores. A silent, creeping dread had already claimed them. On the docks, a lone Italian dock worker, weary from his day's labor, approached the newly arrived ship. He saw the stillness, the unnatural quiet, and a cold shiver traced its way down his spine. He stepped back, his heart pounding, utterly unaware that he stood at the precipice of a global catastrophe. The first whispers of fever and cough were dismissed as common ailments, the usual hardships of a sailor's life. But these were not ordinary sicknesses. They were the harbingers of an apocalypse, a plague that would soon consume everything. The very arteries of medieval commerce, the vibrant trade routes that connected distant lands, now became conduits of death. What once brought silks and spices now delivered pestilence. From Messina, the unseen horror began its relentless march. Port cities, teeming with life and commerce, became the plague's first major battlegrounds. Venice, Genoa, Marseille, and countless others, with their crowded streets and poor sanitation, offered fertile ground for the disease to take root and flourish. The urban sprawl accelerated its spread. An invisible enemy, Yersinia pestis, carried by the fleas that infested the ubiquitous black rats, began its reign of terror. It moved silently, insidiously, from ship to shore, from market to home, a phantom predator stalking humanity. No one understood its nature, only its devastating effect. The world was about to learn a new kind of fear, a fear that seeped into the very bones of existence. This was not a foe that could be met with sword or shield. It was a creeping shadow, an inescapable doom. Then the true horror erupted. The first unmistakable signs of the plague manifested with brutal clarity. Victims developed agonizingly swollen lymph nodes, known as buboes, often in the groin, armpits, or neck, turning the skin a ghastly black. A raging fever consumed the body, accompanied by excruciating pain in every joint and muscle. The afflicted writhed in agony, their minds clouded by delirium, their bodies betraying them. Hope began to wither in the face of such suffering. Desperate families barricaded themselves within their homes, hoping to escape the invisible contagion. But the plague knew no walls, no boundaries. It seeped through cracks, carried on the breath, a relentless invader that mocked all human efforts at containment. The streets, once bustling with life, transformed into charnel houses. The living, few and increasingly frail, struggled to bury the dead. The sheer volume of corpses overwhelmed every custom, every tradition, every shred of dignity. The very fabric of medieval society began to unravel with terrifying speed. Shops stood abandoned, their wares untouched, their doors gaping like empty mouths. Fields, once vibrant with crops, lay fallow, their bounty left to rot. The rhythm of life ceased. The church, the bedrock of medieval existence, found itself utterly overwhelmed. Priests, monks, and nuns, dedicated to ministering to the sick and dying, fell victim in droves. Their solace, their prayers, their very presence vanished. With spiritual guidance faltering and earthly order dissolving, a profound darkness descended upon the world. It was a darkness not merely of night, but of the soul, a pervasive gloom that extinguished hope and fostered despair. The world was plunged into an abyss. The familiar world was gone, replaced by a landscape of fear and desolation. The bells that once marked the hours of prayer now tolled incessantly for the dead, a mournful, unending dirge. As the death toll mounted, desperation reached unimaginable depths. The sheer number of corpses necessitated mass burial pits, hastily dug trenches where bodies were piled indiscriminately. The stench of death became the very air people breathed. In their terror, people turned to extreme acts of penance and superstition. Flagellants emerged, groups of penitents who marched from town to town, publicly whipping themselves with scourges. They believed their self-inflicted suffering would atone for humanity's sins and appease a wrathful God. Astrology, the alignment of the stars, and the wrath of a divine power were blamed for the plague. Rational thought dissolved into a desperate search for meaning in the face of incomprehensible horror. Fear bred fanaticism. The world was a stage for a macabre dance between life and death, where the living were merely waiting for their turn. Every cough, every fever, every ache became a harbinger of the inevitable. Desperate attempts at containment were made, but they were tragically futile. Towns tried to quarantine the sick, isolating them in their homes or in makeshift lazarettos. Belongings of the deceased were burned, their ashes scattered to the wind. But it was too late. The plague had already woven itself into the very tapestry of life. The measures, born of terror and ignorance, could not stem the tide of death. The invisible enemy continued its relentless advance. The clergy, those who remained, continued their selfless, yet often fatal, duties. Church bells tolled constantly, a mournful soundtrack to the unfolding tragedy. Priests administered last rites, heard confessions, and offered what little comfort they could, often succumbing themselves within days. Their sacrifice was immense, a testament to their faith in a world that seemed utterly forsaken. Yet, even their devotion could not halt the plague's devastating progress. The tolling bells became a symbol of unending loss. The plague swept across the European continent with terrifying efficiency, leaving a trail of devastation in its wake. Great cities, once centers of culture and commerce, were transformed into ghost towns, their vibrant life extinguished. Florence, the jewel of Tuscany, saw its population decimated. Venice, the queen of the Adriatic, became a silent labyrinth of canals. Paris, the heart of France, bled its people into the earth. London, the bustling capital of England, fell into a grim stillness. The sheer scale of the catastrophe was incomprehensible. Entire families vanished. Villages were emptied. The land itself seemed to mourn, shrouded in a pervasive silence broken only by the cries of the dying or the mournful toll of distant bells. The world was being remade, not by human hands, but by an unseen force of nature. The familiar landmarks remained, but the life that animated them was gone, replaced by an eerie, haunting emptiness. By the year 1351, the plague began to wane, its fury slowly subsiding. But the world it left behind was irrevocably changed. Millions lay dead, their lives extinguished, their futures unwritten. The scale of the loss was staggering, beyond human comprehension. Survivors emerged into a landscape of profound societal shifts. The old order was shattered. Labor was scarce, land was abundant, and the value of human life, paradoxically, both diminished and soared. A new world, born of ashes, began to stir. The survivors, haunted by the memories of unimaginable suffering, struggled to rebuild. They carried the scars of the pestilence, not just on their bodies, but deep within their souls. The world would never be the same. The Black Death had not merely killed, it had reshaped the very foundations of civilization. It was a cataclysm that echoed through generations, a grim reminder of humanity's fragility in the face of nature's raw power. The Black Death left an indelible legacy of death, fear, and profound societal change. Empty streets and abandoned tools became haunting symbols of the lives lost, the dreams unfulfilled, the future stolen. The silence was deafening. The memory of the pestilence lingered like a phantom limb, a constant ache in the collective consciousness of Europe. It was a wound that would take centuries to heal, if it ever truly could. The world had been irrevocably scarred. This devastating chapter in human history serves as a chilling testament to the fragility of life and the terrifying power of the unseen. It reminds us that even in our most advanced moments, we are but fleeting shadows against the vastness of existence. If this journey through the shadows of the past has stirred something within you, if the echoes of that grim era resonate, then consider sharing your thoughts. Like this account, comment on its chilling truths, and subscribe to delve deeper into the forgotten horrors of history.